All right, back with another edition of a different kind of power rankings, doing one in the middle of the season here. These are always fun. If you haven't seen any of these from years past, I used to do them every week. I'm not sure how I managed to have time for that because they're a time-consuming process to put together. But I used an algorithm based on what positions tend to equate to success and equating a win value to how you rank in specific categories. I use PFF grades to gather the data, and you'll figure it out as it goes along. So let's just jump into it. All right, starting off with the bottom four teams. And again, just to explain what exactly it is you're looking at, the little box on the bottom that will stay there for the entire video. That is just what each, where you rank in each category, what that means for you. So for example, if you have an offensive line that is tier 1, that would equate to 1.85 wins respectively. But yeah, so bottom four teams, I don't think there's any real surprises. I guess I'm a little surprised Denver is this low, but the other ones I think check out to me. Arizona, really rough year so far for Arizona. They are 32nd. The only categories they're getting points in here is their running game has been very strong and their kicking has been average. So because of that, they get 1.46 total wins estimated. That's what that thing all the way to the right is. Total wins estimated. And of course, it's going to be a little fluky because, it doesn't exactly work out the way that you would expect. A 3-win team doesn't always win 3 games. There's going to be that variance in there, but still. Moving on to the Giants, who, again, not a lot going on here. A little bit from their quarterback play, actually. Their coverage has been their best unit, with Tier 4 giving them the most WAR. Coverage, really important. Pass rush has gotten them something. Run defense has gotten them something. Defense has been up and down. Offense has been down. So not a lot of good stuff there. Panthers, again, Bryce Young has not been the biggest issue. Not great receiving play, bad offensive line play, no real running play either, and the defense hasn't really done what we expected it to. It's had its moments for sure, but hasn't graded particularly well here. And in Denver, again, not Russell Wilson's fault. He's the one who gets all the blame, but he's giving them more wins than anything else here. Offensive line's been good as well, but just everything else has been a disaster really. A little bit for running, a little bit for kicking. That's it. Next for a couple of surprises here, but first the Bears, no real surprise them being in the bottom 5. Receiving play has been solid. Running game has been very good, and have a little bit coverage-wise, and good kicking as well, but just not a lot there. And then the Patriots at 27. Those two teams are actually tied. Same amount of win totals, so it should say tied for 27. Typo by me, but you see that good run defense for the Patriots. Receiving core actually hasn't been a disaster either, and they have some things, right? We're getting to the point where we're getting to some of these teams that are like, okay, you have some things. You're not completely devoid of talent. It just hasn't been enough. 26, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think the real surprise here is the receiving core, which you have to wonder how much of that is coaching when you have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and still a tier 4 receiving core. Quarterback play's been fine. Baker Mayfield has not been the issue for Tampa Bay. I think so far he's done what they've paid him to do. Also, I'm recognizing now, it looks like I had a typo on the quarterback play. I think I had it on a few of them where it should be 1.94 instead of 1.76. So they should have a little bit more. I don't believe that would bump them up a slot here. So I don't think it changed anything. Just, if you're counting along at home, just notable there. Hey, some typos happen, right? A lot of data, a lot of numbers I'm going through. But, it's also should be mentioned, if you notice a typo, feel free to let me know in the comments below so we can get things perfectly accurate. But yeah, the receiving core needs to be better for Tampa Bay. It just does. They need to get guys open. And the defense, something that's supposed to be a big strength. I mean, it got torched last week. I wonder how much of its low numbers came from that week in particular. So that's why Tampa Bay is there. And Pittsburgh always breaks this. No matter what. Somehow Mike Tomlin finds a way. They always end up overperforming what the analytical power rankings say they should. With a lot of these teams, I look at it and I'm like, oh, for the Buccaneers, okay, that's interesting. They're probably worse than I thought they were. For the Steelers, I never view it that way because they're one of the few teams that consistently breaks the cycle. Usually it's just kind of randomness that causes it, like the Giants last year. The chart had them as one of the worst teams in football last year, even though they made the playoffs. And then this year we're seeing they weren't very good and got lucky last year. Steelers, no, they're just, I'm assuming it's just Mike Tomlin. Next four, so we have the Colts. Again, Colts have been solid this season. Quarterback play tier 5, it's just going to hurt you. Coverage has been good enough. They've gotten enough defensively to get them a good amount of wins. There still are the issues offensively, so I still don't know if I'm buying into them long term. But again, a competent team here, right? We're at the competent teams. Couple of surprises. In fact, a couple of teams that probably have Super Bowl aspirations are on this chart. First 23, the Browns, which again, if you don't have the quarterback play, it's going to be tough. And PFF has not loved their defense as much as, the overall statistics defensively have. They feel like the coverage has been a little bit lucky to start this season. Pass rush is still tier 1 there, and run defense is tier 2. They just aren't as a believer in the coverage. Maybe that's just coaching and good coaching. That's a possibility. Maybe PFF is stupid. That's a possibility. Or maybe they're onto something. If we're being honest, usually it ends up being that one. Usually it ends up being they're onto something, but we'll see. Receiving core needs to be better as well. For the Browns, I think they're just hoping, the easiest fix there would be quarterback play getting better if Watson gets healthier and better. The Rams are here, who, again, things to like. Stafford's actually been a tier 2 quarterback, and receiving core has been tier 3, even with the injuries. There's just not a lot of help elsewhere. A little bit from the offensive line. Run defense has been really good as well, but that's kind of just been it for the Rams. And then the team that the Rams beat in the Super Bowl 21, the Bengals. But you have to wonder with Cincinnati, how much of this is their slow start factoring in? Because this still says coverage unit is tier 5, but I'm assuming that it's playing better than tier 5. I'm actually a little surprised that it is that low, and I do think that it should be higher there. Receiving core gets credit for tier 3, but is realistically probably going to be tier 1 the rest of the way. Joe Burrow gets credit for tier 2 quarterback play, but is realistically probably going to be a tier 1 quarterback the rest of the way. So again, it's not a flaw in the system. This is what the system is supposed to show, is who's been unlucky so far through the first half of the season and who's been lucky. The Bengals' record has been around mediocre this season, so it makes sense that it would hurt them here as well, but obviously it's not necessarily always the best predictor of future success, and here I would predict that they get better. Number 20, the Jets. The Jets are interesting. So, tier 5 quarterback play, we knew that. Also, tier 5 receiving play and running play. And I should mention, run does not mean the running game as a whole. It simply just means if you're running with the football. Usually a running back, but also if a quarterback runs, that gets thrown in. If a tight end takes a handoff, then that factors in all of that stuff. Offensive line's also not been great, although has weirdly been the bright spot on this offense. The only position to actually get wins added here. Defense has been fantastic. That's why they're here. If you can get, add 4 wins with the quarterback play, that turns them from a mediocre team to a great team. But for now, they do not have Aaron Rodgers, so they're at 20. You also have the Raiders, who are, again, I think better than a lot of us gave them credit for heading into the season. Their record is all right, and I think while some people are wondering, were they just lucky to get that record? This says, no, not really. That's kind of been where they should be at. Offensive line's been good. Receiving core has been, I think underwhelming given the talent they do have, but there's still talent there. The defense has been a big surprise. I thought it would be bad this season, and it really hasn't been. So definitely some good stuff with the Raiders. I'm not sure if, great stuff, but good stuff. The Titans are also kind of in this same boat of, things to like across the board. In fact, only one category they don't add any wins to. That is the pass rush situation, which is an okay one to not have any in. You can live with that as a football team. Kind of what the Titans are, right? They're sort of this complete team that isn't necessarily great at one thing other than the running game, with Derrick Henry being a tier 1 running back. 17, the Chargers, which, Herbert hasn't graded as well this season. Usually you expect him to be at least tier 2. Instead, he's getting the, the incorrect totals for quarterback play with the tier 3. Should be a little bit higher. Him and, the Titans quarterback situation should be a little bit higher. So, again, would not change the ranking, just would change the total a little bit. But, yeah, I mean, receiving core has actually been all right this year, but it's had its up and downs for sure. Offensive line hasn't graded well. Defense has actually graded better than I think a lot of us would have realized. So, interesting how the Chargers came out there, which, again, makes sense. They're a 500 team. They're right here at 17th. I guess that checks out. Next 4, so we have the Balls here, who are at, they're an interesting team. They're, a little bit higher than the Chargers, obviously, just shy of 9 wins. A team trying to make the playoffs and have a good argument to be making the playoffs. I think this, if you're a Washington fan, makes you feel better. Also, yes, the Balls are the Washington football team, also known as the Commanders. Why are they called the Balls? I really don't know. It's just a thing that Kyle said years ago, and it stuck. But Sam Howell's been solid. Tier 3 quarterback, Tier 3 receiving core, Tier 2 offensive line. Defense has been good. It's just a pretty complete team all around other than the kicking situation. So they're currently 16th. And then the Falcons are actually one spot ahead of them, 2 teams that might be fighting for that 7th seed in the NFC. Again, the Tier 5 quarterback play is what's killing Atlanta. There's good things. Tier 1 offensive line, Tier 2 receiving play. Running game actually has, I believe that's in Tier 4, not Tier 5, but both don't get you any wins. You got to get at least a Tier 3 to get some wins added there. So that's a surprise given how much resources they pumped into that. And I wonder if some of the quarterback runs brings that average down, or just the way teams know you got to defend a run brings that down a little bit. Defense has been good as well for Atlanta, but if that quarterback play doesn't get better, 9 wins feels about right for me. The Chiefs are somehow this low, and it's interesting because usually for Kansas City, they are another team that the algorithm doesn't fully work with, because typically Patrick Mahomes is always a Tier 1 quarterback, but he doesn't grade always as a Tier 1 quarterback. And that's happening here. And I would say that, in my mental, math type side of things, I'm kind of giving them, 1.2 wins, which is the difference between Tier 1 and Tier 2 quarterback play. But even with that, you're looking at a little over 10 wins on the season. That's nothing spectacular. In fact, it would only have them move up to 12th place if that was the case, because offensive line hasn't graded great. The interior is great. The tackles are not. Wide receiving play has not graded great. And again, it is worth mentioning, when I say wide receiver, it's a bit misleading. It's really just receiving in general. So running backs running routes and tight ends running routes are also factored in. It hasn't been great, and they haven't been crazy about the Chiefs' defense either. PFF hasn't, in terms of how it's graded. I do think, though, it could be pretty consistent year in and year. I do think it's better than maybe they're giving it credit for. I do have to say, though, if you look at that Miami game, there were plenty of examples of guys getting open and just the ball not getting there for whatever reason. So it does happen. I do kind of understand why PFF has it there. Good kicking, though, and it's the Chiefs. They have Mahomes. They're still a Super Bowl contender, but just interesting there. The Packers are at 13. This is a surprise. PFF's love their coverage, although it is worth mentioning. Big part of that was Rasul Douglas, who is no longer on the football team, so that's going to hurt. They actually haven't hated Jordan Love, which is interesting to me. So something to pay attention to. Receiving core still isn't great. Pass rushers had some issues, but the run defense has been good. It's graded well. We just haven't seen it yet, but it does maybe give you some optimism if you are a Packers fan that maybe the team is better than we feel like they are, and maybe they could make a run at that 7 seed that I keep saying is wide open. Next how about the Tennessee Titans? Unfortunately, can't quite get to that 10-win mark, or just shy of 10 wins. CJ Stroud's graded as a Tier 3 quarterback, which, if you've watched every game like I have, that does feel fair. He's obviously shown flashes of Tier 1 quarterback play, but there have been some, he's played like a rookie at times, but a really good one, and he's also played like an elite player at times. So I would actually expect him to be better than Tier 3 by the time this is all said and done. Offensive line's Tier 3, that checks out. Receiving core has been Tier 1, and that's been awesome for the Texans. I mean, we didn't expect that at all. That's been great. Their coverage has been great. Haven't had a lot else, but you don't need a lot else. And if you think, can they make run on a playoff spot? This chart says yes, they absolutely can. The Jaguars are 1 spot ahead of them. They're division rivals. Lawrence is graded really well. Tier 2 quarterback play, but the rest of the offense has been underwhelming, to say the least. Nothing above Tier 4 the rest of the way, with the exception of the running game, which doesn't get you that much unless it's Tier 1. Coverage has been awesome, and that's definitely something to be excited about if you're a Jaguars fan, but so far it's those 2 main things. The Saints are next on the list, which you just hope Carr keeps getting better, but honestly, Tier 3 quarterback play, that's kind of what you expect of Derek Carr. That's kind of what you went out and paid for, so I don't know if it's going to get that much better Receiving core, I think you maybe had a little higher hopes for. It's been tier 3 so far. The coverage has been awesome, though. So honestly, if it's just that, if it's great run defense, great coverage unit, and then tier 3 quarterback play and wide receiving play, that should easily be enough for them to win the division. The next closest, according to this, was the Falcons, who were just shy of 9 wins. This has the Saints over 11. So the analytical power rankings thinks the Saints should make the playoffs. And the Seahawks. Okay, Seahawks have had an up and down year. PFF's still a fan for the most part. Receiving core has graded really well. Coverage is graded really well. Quarterback play, not elite. And again, those are the three money positions, right? If you can get tier 1s and all of those, you're almost certainly going to win the Super Bowl. It's like that, important. And while the Seahawks haven't quite done that, they've gotten a lot of those points that are there for the taking, and still have some other points across the board as well. So, no category of zeros, which is always important. So, that's why they're at 9. Okay, top 8 now. We're getting close to it. A couple of surprises, in my opinion. The Eagles, not one of those. I think the Eagles, if anything, maybe it's a surprise that they're not a little bit higher, but them being, up here in the pantheon of great teams checks out. They have the best record in football. PFF hasn't loved their coverage, and I kind of do see why, but so far, it's kind of been, A.J. Brown, it's one of those things with the receiving core, and part of why it can be, one of the flaws in this chart, which it's not perfect, obviously, is that when you have a guy like A.J. Brown, I think his value adds more than maybe a number 3 receiver not adding a ton of value. They have had some depth there, but I would still say they get the overall value of a tier 1 receiving core. And I'm surprised Hurts is only tier 2, but maybe part of that is, some of his value comes from scrambling and things like that, which I don't know how much PFF values that. But Eagles are very good. The Vikings, man, that has to hurt if you're a Vikings fan, right? Where you have, if you have a team that, according to this, says it's actually good. I mean, last year, it was the opposite. Last year, their record was good, but the chart said not as good as the record might indicate, and it was proven right. They got knocked out round 1. This year, it's the opposite. But so much of that is Kirk Cousins' tier 1 quarterback grade, which is obviously going to fall from here on out. But even if that's, I think the good thing is, even if that is tier 5, with the way this team is constructed, that should still be enough to give you a chance at that 7th seed, if nothing else, especially given the fact that they currently have the best, are in the 7th spot, right? Like that's where their record is at. So, Brian Flores done incredible work with that coverage unit. So deserves a lot of credit there. Cowboys at 6. That's a surprise. I didn't think they'd be that high, but you think about, tier 1 pass rush, tier 2 coverage, tier 2 receiving core. That's been the main thing. I've had my criticisms about their depth there, but so far it's worked out. And Prescott's, having a good year. No getting around it. Prescott's playing better than you usually expect him to. So that's why they're so high. The Lions are currently at 5. I wonder for how long, though. I'm just going to be honest, Lions fans, because I don't know if Jared Goff's a tier 1 quarterback. I like Jared Goff. I think he's a good quarterback, but and he's been great this season for sure. I just always feel like when you have a guy who's been a career tier 3 quarterback and then halfway through one season, he's getting a tier 1 quarterback grade, I feel like more often than not, they're going to play like a tier 3 quarterback the rest of the way than a tier 1 quarterback the rest of the way. But again, even if that's the case, we're still talking about them as a contender to win the NFC. So interesting stuff there. I also just realized Cowboys ahead of the Eagles. Eagles fans won't like that. Hey, I don't make the chart, all right? I just punch in the numbers. I made the algorithm. Don't get mad at me. Top 4 now. Miami, despite a disappointing loss, is still right here with tier 1 quarterback play, tier 1 receiving play, the tier 3 coverage unit, but tier 1 run defense. And again, they're getting points everywhere across the board. So, not a lot to dislike and some things to absolutely love with the Dolphins. I guess the question is, do you feel Tua is a tier 1 quarterback, or is he just playing like one right now? Well, we'll find out the rest of the way. The Bills are at 3. It's interesting how, 3 out of these 4 teams, I feel like, have been on a little bit of a slump as of late. The Bills are interesting. So they're getting credit for tier 1 receiving play, although it's not all with wide receivers. Dalton Kincaid's graded really well, and they've had good halfback grades as well. So I still do feel like they could use some extra receiving help, despite the tier 1 receiving play. I actually would have it lower. That's just my personal opinion. But the chart says they're here. Coverage unit has been very good. Again, there's some injuries, so maybe the defense is lower. But I do think that, especially looking at this chart, it's possible, people, including myself, have been too low on Buffalo. There is a lot that's still really good about this team. So I think that, well, in my tier rankings, putting them, I think I put them pretty low. I'd probably bump them up a tier now after seeing this, in my opinion. Number 2, the 49ers, who, again, only tier 3 quarterback play. It's not, and actually, technically, now I'm thinking about this because of my typo, they actually should be team number 1. I just kind of realized that. So my whole chart is skewed in the worst possible way. They should be tier 1 instead of tier 2 because of that. But it's that close. They should be literally 0.02 wins ahead of the Ravens. So it's a virtual tie there. Receiving core has been awesome for them. Running game's been awesome for them. Coverage has been awesome for them. Pass rush has been awesome for them. A lot of stuff has been awesome. And the Ravens haven't quite been as good at some of that stuff, like receiving play and, pass rush. They make up for it with Lamar Jackson. And I have to say, I've had this theory for years, and I feel pretty vindicated. If you just get Lamar a tier 3 receiving core, he'll go back to MVP Lamar, and look at what has happened. I said that for years, that the criticisms of Lamar are really criticisms of the Ravens offense, and we've seen it exactly play out that way. So the Ravens and Niners, who knows? Maybe we'll get a Super Bowl rematch. That would be fun. But yeah, those are the analytical power rankings. Don't take it as gospel, just a tool to use to help you better evaluate how these teams are. Just always interesting. So yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.